Welcome to Mind, Money, Balance, the no guilt, no shame podcast to help you get your mind and money in balance. I'm your host, Linzy. I'm a financial therapist and coach, woman of color, and popcorn connoisseur. I am so glad you're here. Let's go. On today's Mind, Money, Balance podcast guest, I have another Linzy on. Linzy Bonham is a therapist who teaches other therapists how to confidently manage their business finances and build a whole new relationship with money. Sound familiar? She teaches money skills for therapists and loves focusing on the how of money. She loves being able to help healers, especially around money, since most of us were not taught these skills. She lives in Guelph, Ontario, where she spends time gardening, drinking entirely too much tea, and chasing around her adorable toddler. I'm so excited for you to meet Linzy, especially because, again, it comes back to something I'd said on the episode with Tiffany McLean, that you can have more than one person in your niche if you are out there and you're a therapist and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm an anxiety therapist for millennials, but there's another one in the next town over. Like, it's good. It's proof of concept that more people need your message and that you may not be for everyone and they may not be for everyone. So it's such a great way to have other people on the podcast, to connect with other people who are in your niche, so to speak. And that's why I'm really excited to have this conversation with Linzy. So make sure to tune in and listen till the end for the takeaways, as always. All right, Linzy Bonham, thank you so much for joining the Mind, Money, Balance podcast. Welcome, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I was going to try and differentiate between you and I, because we're both Linzys. So I thought, we can just do Linzy B, but I'm Linzy B and you're also Linzy B. So people are just going to have to get used to our voices being different and we'll make it work.
I know we're not going to spell our names out loud. We could do that too, but
no, we are not.
Sound different. I think we're going to be okay.
I think so. So first things first, give folks an idea of who you are and what you do both professionally and for fun.
So professionally, I do a couple things. So I have two hats. I've not been able to not have two hats for my whole professional life. And so I'm a therapist in private practice. My specialty is complex trauma and dissociation, but I have what I call now a micro practice. I have 3 clients right now. And
okay, say that again, because I want to make sure everyone heard how many clients you have.
I have 3.
Yes.
Really like 2.5 if you count that one of them is biweekly. Yes. So yeah, I'm calling it my micro practice. That makes it sound cute. I'm into cute things right now. And so I do that. But my bigger hat that I wear more often is I teach therapists how to manage their business finances through the course that I teach Money Skills for Therapists. So that's my professional life. I've got those 2 pieces. And then for fun, I'm going to say I'm deep into being a mom right now. So for fun, I chase around my toddler and teach him how to count. I'm like doing the mom thing really hard right now. I'm living that typical pandemic life right now of like work, parent, fall on your face, work, parent, fall on your face. So that's but I'm really, really enjoying parenting. It's very fun.
Good. I love it. And I saw, because, people can only hear us, they can't see us. But before we hit record, I saw a board game that was balancing your microphone, which I'm obsessed with. Are you also into games?
Yes. Okay. I was more into games. My partner actually owned a board game cafe in our town.
That's like a dream.
So we were like really into games for a while, and now like that business has closed. So we're kind of like taking a break from games in a way. But yes, really into games. I have a hutch downstairs that I inherited. It's a family heirloom. And instead of china, it's full of board games. That's our display in the downstairs.
I'm obsessed with
my partner's board game collection.
I love it. I love it. What are your faves right now?
And it's a nice thing to do online.
Yes.
Oh, my faves. Right now I'm going light because it's like baby's gone to bed. You have 10 minutes. So what are we playing right now? We're playing Hive. Like I'm talking, do you know Hive? It's like a chess game with bugs. They all move differently.
No.
My son's into it because he's like bee, and that's a word that he knows.
Yes.
So we play like really light things like Hive. There's another one. I can picture the box. It's like buying silks and camels and trading. Like really like 2-player games is where I'm at. I used to be into like Power Grid, Ticket to Ride, and like 3-hour, 4-hour games. Because my partner, he does like the 12-hour games. That's not me. But I'm finding now I'm doing like that light version. Yeah. What type of games are you into?
Oh my gosh. So I love games, but my partner's not a big gamer. So I have to like convince people to play. And obviously pandemic times, it's not like I'm having people over to play board games. No. Yeah. So no,
online board games is actually a really good thing though. That's actually a really nice way to hang out with people. We've done that a lot. A Zoom board game party online. It's really lovely.
I love that. Okay. So I love, first of all, thank you for letting us take that detour into board games. I think it's so important to just highlight that we are more than, you know, what I've heard on so many podcasts, and myself included, like whether, you know, as I kind of get into the rhythm of doing interviews and being interviewed, we get into like this robotic kind of cut and paste where we just say, this is what I do. Here's my buzzword and the end. And I think it's so important to remember that, yes, we're therapists. Yes, like you said, you're a wife, you're a mom, but we are multifaceted people. So thanks for taking us on that detour.
Absolutely.
So what's that?
I said, absolutely. Happy to do it.
Yes.
It's very boring being just a therapist or a business owner and like polished.
Yes. And I think for me as both a therapist and a business owner, I find more aligned clients, and my business grows the more and more transparent I am. Of course, up to the point of comfort and safety. Like I'm not going to disclose my mental health history because some of it is just frankly private, but some of it is I'm comfortable disclosing. Same thing with my money stuff, right? I'm comfortable disclosing parts of my money story, and then certain parts also stay private. So I think it's really helpful to be therapists and entrepreneurs who are multifaceted people and show many sides of ourselves.
I absolutely agree. And I think too, now with like, especially with working online where we can reach so many people, I feel like we have more opportunity to just really show who we are and find those people who are really your people, which can be so specific, but it's a really exciting opportunity. I find like I work with people, I'm in Canada. I work with people all over Canada and the US. So it's like this very, very large pool of people that you get to really distill down into like your people and people who really connect and support each other. And so showing up as who you actually are allows that to happen.
Yes. And it prevents people from kind of falling into your orbit who might then later find out that you're not the best fit for them, right? Because you maybe had repeated some generic messaging that you thought was imperative as a therapist, and they were drawn to that generic messaging. Then they find out that that's actually not who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a new concept that I've been bouncing around in my brain, which is like, it's good when people don't like you. And then the flip side of that is there's also people you don't like and you don't want them to like you. Like there's going to be people you don't want to work with and you want to make it clear to them that like you're not for them because they're also not for you. So really owning that, I think, makes our work so much more enjoyable.
I couldn't have teed this better about some people not liking you and some people, and you not liking some people. But quite literally before we got on this episode, I had sent out my email newsletter this morning, as I do on Monday mornings, and somebody replied thinking they were forwarding it to a friend, but it went to me. And it said, hey, I don't really like her, but I like what she does. Thought you would find it interesting. And I was like, you know, for a second, I was like, ouch. And then I was like, you know what? Two things I learned in that very short email message was one, you don't have to like me, but you can still find some of my things interesting. Obviously, this person has stayed on my email list long enough to get an idea that they don't like me, but they like what I teach. So cool. And also, it goes back to this idea of repelling those who aren't a good fit for you. Again, this particular person might have ended up in my orbit only to come to find out that she doesn't really like me. So it's perfect timing. And again, having been an entrepreneur for a little while and a therapist for a longer while, I've developed a pretty thick skin. So how did you get into the money side of therapy? Because I think there are so few of us who really love the numbers when it comes to all of this. So spill the tea on that.
Yeah. So I've always been a numbers person, which is always something that I feel a little hesitant sharing because I'm like, that's not relatable, but that's the truth. I've always been kind of a numbers person. I have lots of geeky stories from being a kid about like figuring out how much money I could save by buying candy in bulk. But when I got into private practice, I was really young by my own story, but also by my college's story. They were like, I'm flipping through and it was like, if you haven't been practicing for 5 years, don't start a private practice. There was like, that was the first page of this like book I got from my association. I was like, I just kept flipping, like just kept going. Like I kind of pushed through a lot of stories that I shouldn't start a private practice in order to start my private practice. And then it went really well, really fast. And something that I soon realized though, is that part of why it went really well, really fast is because I had these skills that my colleagues didn't have. So as I started to like connect with more private therapists and like make friends with people who were often like 30 years older than me, I realized that they were terrified of the financial part of private practice. And even if they'd been in private practice for 20 years, they had like really no concept of their numbers. They were charging like way less than me. Like I had to push through the mindset piece of charging more than my colleagues who'd been practicing since I was in like the third grade. I was like, well, that's their choice. I'm going to charge what I'm going to charge. Like, I'm not going to wait my turn. But what I just realized is they just didn't have a grapple on the numbers. They had not actually looked at like, how does their fee actually impact their salary? How much are they actually making? How much are they spending on things? They had no framework. And so part of why I kind of stepped into working with the numbers and helping therapists with money was like, because I wanted to help my friends to be able to build healthy practices and take care of themselves. Like I developed a real passion about the fact that like nobody's doing this for us. So if you don't learn how to do it, nobody else is saving for your retirement. Like nobody else is going to make sure that you can take time off. And what so often happens with therapists is they just don't save for retirement. They just don't take paid time off. They get sick and then they have to. So it was like through like basically like my love for some of my colleagues and wanting to see better for them that I developed the course that is still the course I teach today, which is Money Skills for Therapists.
I love what you said about just kind of owning what you like to do. You like numbers, you like figuring it out. It is very much an equation that is meant to be solved. And you went into private practice going, here's the number I need to bring in. Let me reverse engineer and figure out how I get there. That part makes a lot of sense to me. And I imagine for a lot of listeners, they can resonate with this idea of making like data-driven decisions. The thing I'm more curious about is how did you get to the point where you were confident enough to not let what other people were doing dictate what you did or didn't do? Like I heard you say, yeah, somebody else in town is charging the fees they've been in practice since I was in grade school and they're charging lower fees than me. How did you not let kind of the therapy peer pressure change your mind?
I think part of what I did is I found new community. So I realized that my local community was not going to lift me up. And that's because they are not lifting themselves up. It's through no kind of malice, but that just wasn't here. And that's kind of a Canadian thing, to be honest. Like in Canada, we have to hustle a lot less because we have healthcare and other things that I won't get into. It's all very boring, but we have less safety net. So a lot of people have less kind of like hustle and focus. And so what I started to do is I found people who inspired me online and I started to build my community out that way. So I already had some of that in me. Like there was definitely a part of me that was like a rebel. I have like a part of me that's like, watch. Yes. Like there was nothing more motivating for me than when I had a professor in university tell me I would never get an A in her class. I was like, oh yeah, watch. Even though I was terrified of her. She was very scary. But I did. I got an A in her class. Yeah. So there is also a rebel part of me that's not like a dominant part, but that is definitely can get activated by people telling me I'm not allowed to do something that I know in my heart is right. So there was that, but then it was actually finding a community of peers who all turned out to be on like the west coast of the States, which is the opposite side of the continent of me. It was by finding those people that I had kind of the support to like go even further than I was already going.
Yeah. It's so interesting listening to that. And what I heard there is just the importance of having a support system that works for you. As we mentioned moments ago, there are going to be plenty of people who aren't a good fit for you, whether that's clinically or whether that's just personally. Yep. But what I heard is it is important to find your space in your community of people who can support you as you kind of make these moves. And how did having a community of either entrepreneurial therapists or money-minded folks, how did that help you as you grew your business?
I mean, it was everything. It was where I got my information. It's where I got my strategies from. It's where I got modeling on how things could be done because I really did not know anybody in my life or in my local community who was doing what I wanted to do, which was actually to like build a course and have bigger impact and reach people. And so it was by having those connections and basically seeing what was possible, but also having people reflect back to me my gifts and my potential, that I was able to launch. Like I consider myself an ambivert. So I do have some of that like introvert, do it myself, but what really lights me up is engaging with people. And so without those relationships, like I truly don't think I could have done what I've done to this point.
Yeah. So lots of community help, lots of seeing other people doing it and pushing the boundaries that helped, and that kind of aligned with this internal rebel. So some people listening to this might be like, okay, Lindsay, like you've done your thing, you found your people, but I've made 1,000,001 mistakes. Did you make any mistakes or have hiccups along the way during this journey?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Care to elaborate?
Like, I think some of my mistakes, I think back to just like when I started my practice, and playing small has always been a challenge for me. And it's kind of my natural tendency to play small. So, like setting sliding scale fees that were like just so resentment engendering, like that just immediately weren't working for me. But not understanding that about myself, not having that insight to understand that I can't actually work for $30 an hour and feel good about it. That's really big. Definitely like also falling in sometimes with the wrong people, and kind of like being in a group for a while and then realizing like, oh, this is actually holding me back. Like these folks are stuck and I don't want to be stuck, and having to like step out and find new people. But definitely falling into stuckness is something that can happen to me. And so that's why it's really important for me to really be like eyes wide open around who I'm around. Do I feel lit up after I engage with them? Or do I feel like, oh yeah, this is hard. This isn't going to work. Like this isn't possible because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So yeah. And undercharging, working way too hard. I consider myself a highly sensitive person, light, if that's a thing. And so that means I can't see a lot of clients, but I look around at other people, see other people being like, oh, well, 20 hours a week is full, so I'll do like 18, and then just falling on my face and doing that over and over and over again until finally I had to like really listen and realize, no, it doesn't matter if my friend can see 9 clients a day. I can't. The end. So yeah, trying to do what other people are doing. Like, I use the term sometimes in my course of like, keep your eyes on your own work. Like it doesn't matter if that person's practice works that way and they see clients from like 6 to 10 p.m. If you're not an evening person, it's not going to work for you. Keep your eyes on your own work. Like what makes sense for you? And I've definitely followed a lot of paths that were not for me.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 great things that I heard in that response is permission to change. Permission to say this group or this mindset or this methodology really worked for me for a period of time, and I'm grateful for it. And just because something worked 1 year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago doesn't mean it will necessarily work now. And I find so many of my clients will come in and say things like, well, I used to just use an Excel sheet, or I used to just use this automated service and everything was fine, but now it doesn't work. And they beat themselves up for feeling like somehow they'd failed, when the reality is they've just evolved in some way. Their lifestyle is no longer the same. So permission to change was one huge thing that I heard there. And then the other thing I heard there, I love keep your eyes on your own work. That's what I also talk about all the time in my work is, look, this is one example or one idea of how you can do things, but really take what works and leave what doesn't. So really getting comfortable with that, the idea that personal finance is exactly that. It's personal. There are some people who have come onto the show who are proponents of FIRE, the financial independence, retire early. And then you have some people who come onto the show and they're like, I love my work and I will probably work forever. And it's not that one of those is right or wrong. It's that those are each right for that particular person. What about some roadblocks you see with your clients, not your clinical clients, but your therapy clients who you're helping in money, nuts and bolts? Tell me a little bit about what some of those common roadblocks are that you see.
Yeah. So my course is Money Skills for Therapists, and my students, by and large, tend to have a lot of shame and confusion about money, is kind of like a lot of the folks who come in. So some of the roadblocks are just stories like, I'm not a numbers person and I've never been good at this, like these kind of identity-based stories, or like, I'm a broke person. And so that's something that I have them start to unpack immediately when they get into the course, because those stories about who you are when it comes to money, these fixed stories, as you just said, like really deny us permission to grow and change and be different and be surprised about what we're capable of. That's a big roadblock I see, is like that baggage that people carry in, and so throughout my course, in addition to helping people build actual systems and skills, we spend a lot of time and make a lot of space for just like unpacking the emotions that come with money. Because if you're not spending time with those, you can't take in the skills and you can't build a good system if every time you sit down to work on money, you want to like vomit and you leave and you never go back. So that's a big roadblock that I see. And then another roadblock actually goes exactly to what you just said, which is this idea that there's one way to do it. And I think like that's because there's a few reasons I think that is, but one of them I think is like we just have such a scarcity of information about managing money and about money in general that we don't get to see like a bunch of different great models. Usually we see no good models at all. So it's hard for people to, there's kind of a poverty of imagination there about just how many different ways you can make money work for you and who you are. And there's no right way. And I think there are so many different systems out there and like tools that work differently for different people's brains. So it's about finding what works for your brain. And if that isn't QuickBooks, then your accountant's job is to take the information you give them and plug them into the right places. Like you don't need to do that for them in order to work with an accountant. Yeah. So yeah, part of it is just overcoming that block of the right way to do things. Perfectionism is a huge block I see with my students. Like I am a recovering perfectionist on good days, and my students are definitely perfectionists too. And it's just like letting go of that need to do it perfectly. Yeah. Like doing it 80% is way better than not doing it at all. And like the phrase that I've started using is like, perfect is the enemy of done. Yeah. Just get it done. You can clean it up later. Mm-hmm. Your accountant can clean it up later. Mm-hmm. But if you get paralyzed and do nothing, that's like going to put you way further behind than doing it imperfectly.
Yeah. And as you're speaking, I'm nodding along because those are almost identical things that I teach in my work. And a lot of it is doing things where you feel 80% comfortable with things. And then the other piece is that most things financially are fixable, reversible, mutable. There are very few things that we do in our financial lives that if we do it one time, we're screwed forever and ever. So I think it's important to remember that a lot of things, you can try it one way for 3 months and you can always change it up and try something else. So getting to the systems and the tools, what are the things that you love either in your business life or your personal life to help keep your money organized and managed?
Yeah. So I'm a big YNAB fan. I'm sure many people you've talked to on the show are YNAB fans, or maybe not. But YNAB is something that came into my own life maybe about like 6 years ago when my partner and I started managing money together. Previous to that, I was like using a spreadsheet that made sense to my brain. And then I tried to make a very complicated spreadsheet for both of us. And it just got real messy real fast. And so YNAB, I find just the philosophy of like pushing money forward into the future and like being a month ahead and then having like the flexibility to like, okay, you spent more here than you thought. So just move some money from somewhere else. And the ability to like see your goals, building towards your goals, just that tool I find super helpful. And it's something that a lot of my students choose to use for their businesses because of the power of being able to actually budget in your business is something that I'm very, very passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Is it fair to say that you like gamifying things?
Yes, I want to be better at gamifying things. Because as an achiever, and I see this with my students too, it's so easy to hit a goal, like to do something and then not actually like get the ding, 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 ding reward. So that's something I work on in my own life. And in my business, I'm working to gamify things more because it's so easy in finances too, where it's like you strive towards your goal, you hit your goal, and then you just set a new goal. Yes. And it's like, where do we get to pause and like celebrate? So I have for my business, I've started really gamifying things. And we have on the wall here next to me, there's a series of sheets of milestones for all these different metrics for my business, like how many people are in my Facebook group, how many people are in my course at one time, like a single day payout from the course. And as I hit goals, I get prizes because it really also just like helps me just stop and be grateful and recognize progress. And so I'm definitely working on that in my business. And I would actually love to incorporate more of that into my personal life because YNAB certainly gives me the opportunity to gamify things even more than I have been.
Okay. What are your prizes?
I just got one. Actually, I just got a few this month. So this month I got a dishwasher. Which is a big deal when you have a baby and you have not had a dishwasher. I feel like a true adult now. I'm like, I made it. I got a dishwasher. I bought a used dishwasher, by the way. That's how I roll. But I also just got a big order of tea. So I'm like just ridiculously wholesome, unfortunately, is like the long and short of it. I used to be like a cool punk, and now I'm like tea, gardening shows, baking shows, bed, dream life. And so I got a big order of tea, which was my milestone for having like 15 students in the course at one time. And it was very exciting. And we spent a lot of time like poring over the different tea selections from this company that I learned about, and ordered 7 different tins of tea, beautiful tins. I'm like such an old woman, but I'm so into it. Like it's just the simple pleasure goes a long way for me. So, and I also got like some nice clothes this month too. I like to buy like sustainable and like fair trade ethical kind of clothing. So it's expensive. And so I got a couple new pairs of jeans, which felt great.
I love that. Store. Yes, I love that. And a lot of my clients are actually very similar in the clothing and tea departments. A lot of them also really value sustainability and well-made clothes, and clothes that are made in humane ways. So yes. I love that you're spending in alignment with those values. Now, what about somebody who says, you know, Linzy, I love the idea of prizes, but I don't want to spend money on a prize. What are other non-purchase based prizes that you can think of?
Yeah, like, I mean, we have some prizes on there that are more experiential. So like going for like a hike for the afternoon, or a picnic in the park, or, you know, I can see like going on a day trip to go visit friends in another city. You know, like I'm really a big fan of just being really intentional and present with what's happening. I think presence is so much of what actually makes things enjoyable and worthwhile. And so often when we're trying to spend money, it's because we're trying to get a feeling that sometimes we don't even get, because we're not even really present with what just happened. And then it passes by, or you get that little dopamine hit, and then it's like, no, now it's another thing in your house. And so I think about that sometimes, like, what is the actual experience I'm trying to get? And so the good news is so many experiences are actually free, that just by like planning it, building up to it, putting some extra excitement around it, you know, like planning a picnic and actually like making treats for it. Like, it's so much of, I think, what makes life really enjoyable is just actually holding still and just being in whatever experience you're building for yourself in that moment. So there's so many ways to celebrate that are free or cost like $5.
I love that. Yeah. So talking about experiences, big and small. And one of the things that I'm hearing is that, yes, you can buy things and you can have experiences, but either way, whether you buy something as a prize or whether you choose an experience as a prize, to really fully enjoy it. And part of that enjoyment is pausing for a moment and going, how does this make me feel? What kind of feeling is this emulating in me? How can I hold on to that moment of joy? So I love that idea.
Yeah. And something that I've noticed, like I just mentioned that I'm ridiculously wholesome and watch gardening shows. So I'm a big fan of Monty Don, who's this British gardener. He's like this very tall giant who helps people with their gardens. And something that I've noticed about that show is like, sometimes we have financial goals that are really about what we want our life to be like. Right. And so we work really hard to save money. So for instance, somebody who, I remember one episode where it's like someone who works so hard. She's like in the city all day. She has this long commute, and all she wanted was this gorgeous Japanese garden so that she could like come home and just like be present and calm and rest. And she did. She created this gorgeous garden, but she didn't actually change anything about her life. So it's like sometimes we put, you know, we think that money is going to change our behavior and change our quality of our experience of ourselves. But so often those things that we're seeking don't actually cost money, because what she really wanted was just to like sit in her garden and rest at the end of the day. And you could do that without a beautiful Japanese garden, or by buying like a little Japanese statue that you can appreciate and planting a little bed. But I think so often we substitute financial goals for actually just making the changes that we actually want to make in our lives. And we're not doing that part of it.
Yeah, so well said, that we're often chasing after something that we think will give us a particular feeling. And sometimes we can cultivate that feeling in another way. And it may be, in this example, it sounded just like space and downtime was what this person was craving. Yes. And they thought that the garden would give them the space and downtime, when in reality, perhaps finding a new job that wasn't as stressful, where they could telecommute, that might have provided a little bit more safety and space that they were looking for. So I love that example.
Precisely. Yeah. So it's being present with what it is that you actually are seeking. with that.
Love it. So as we wrap up today, where can people find you? And do you have any exciting offers kind of going on in your world that you want people to know about?
So people could find me at moneynutsandbolts.com. I have a free tax workshop there where if people are confused about how much to save for taxes as private practitioners, that's often a confusing headache area for so many of us. So there is a free workshop there that's 1 hour. It's a total education teaching workshop helping you figure out how much to save for taxes based on where you live and your spouse's income. Like it gets pretty nitty gritty, but helping you actually have clarity and then how to create a system to actually do that and set money aside, some mindset stuff around taxes. That's a free workshop that people can just snap up there. And that will also get you onto my mailing list, into my world where you can hear about money skills for therapists and all the other free offers that I have too.
Oh my gosh. So fantastic. Well, it has been such a treat chatting with another Linzy who's a therapist and interested in money. I really, really have enjoyed this, and I hope the listeners have too.
Thank you so much.
Let's get into this episode's takeaway. So the first thing I took from my conversation with Linzy was finding your people and your community. Now, this sounds a lot like Danielle Swim, the entrepreneurial therapist who was on episode 34. If you haven't listened to that, she covers that as well. And for today's guest, that sounded like charging more than her colleagues who've been practicing since she said she was in 3rd grade. She really found the importance of finding others who are charging in alignment with what they need instead of just based on like the loosey-goosey, what I think I should be charging. And for her, it meant finding people over on the West Coast of the United States to find her group of people who spoke and sounded the way that she did when it came to money. So when it comes to creating a relationship with money, finding your community is so important. And I talk about this a lot, especially when it comes to money, because so many of us have money shame, right? We feel bad, we feel guilty, we feel uncomfortable about money. And what makes shame worse is secrecy, silence, and judgment. So when we can alleviate the secrecy and silence by talking about money with others in a community, when we can alleviate the judgment by knowing that we're not alone, that helps us to heal and to dial down that money shame so we can have a healthy relationship with money. Takeaway number 2, permission to change. Linzy talked about changing the path that was not working for her when it came to tracking her numbers. She was doing an old school spreadsheet style. And then when she discovered YNAB, also known as You Need a Budget, that helped her in finding a tracking system that works. And for you, this might be a tracking system with your money. This might be, if you're a therapist, maybe pivoting the way in which you are showing up in your office. That might mean leaning more on intuition and what feels right instead of something rigid like cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy. It's permission to change, right? We're always growing. We're always evolving. This is something I've struggled with, right? I used to think that if I made a decision, I had to stick with it. Otherwise, it was being flaky. And the reality is changing your mind is growth. So give yourself all the permission to change. Third and final takeaway, make it fun, right? Gamify your money, give yourself prizes, throw yourself a dance party, create a money playlist. Linzy talked about using kind of the rebel part of herself as motivation, but then she also talked about something more sustainable, which is giving herself little prizes when she achieves financial goals. You know, after we recorded this conversation, she was talking about buying stacks and stacks of tea that was really warm and welcoming to her. And that was a little token of congratulations, you achieved XYZ goal. So when it comes to money goals, you can reward yourself, of course, with a purchase, but you can also reward yourself with other little fun ways of self-care. You know, maybe exploring a new trail in your town or in your area, maybe doing a Zoom game night with your friends, but finding ways to celebrate it, popping open that bottle of wine or that bottle of kombucha that you'd been saving for a special day. gamify it, make it fun, celebrate. We need to celebrate more things in our lives, especially when it comes to achieving monetary goals, be it bringing in more money, be it paying somebody for a service, be it paying down debt, whatever it needs, make it fun. And with that, I will see you next time on Monday for the next episode of Mind, Money, Balance. If you love this episode, take a screenshot and tag me on Instagram at MindMoneyBalance with your favorite takeaway. I love seeing what resonates with my listeners and sharing it in my stories. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see you next week right here. Neither the host or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, medical, or other professional information. If you want professional help, please seek it out.